Hi, guys and gals. I'm John, and I've spent almost all my conscious life in absolute darkness. Doctors made me able to see only 6 months ago. And now I am ready to confess. It would be better if I remained blind forever. My parents told me that for the first several months of my life, they did not even realize that I could not see. I behaved just like any normal baby. Stared at anything that grabbed my attention, cried, and eagerly shook the baby rattle before falling asleep. Mom and Dad began to suspect that something was wrong only when I started learning to walk. After several of my unlucky collisions with stools, chairs, and tables that ended with bumps and bruises, my parents took me to a doctor. There, he told them that I was as blind as a bat. Funny thing is, the doctors could not even explain to Mom and Dad why my eyes refused to work as they should. The medics drew their eyebrows together, frowned, shook their heads, gave my parents some lengthy lectures with dozens of complex terms in Latin, but weren't able to give any adequate explanation. In time, my parents realized that my eyes were fine. The problem was with my brain. Some of the important connections there have never formed. Therefore, the doctors agreed that I had zero chance to become sighted in the future. Mom and Dad had to accept the fact that their son will never be able to see their faces. Raising a blind child was a difficult trial for my parents. I was too small to understand why my mother often cried in her room at night. She must have gone there to cry so as not to embarrass me with her tears. Unfortunately, the parents did not take into account that the blind have better hearing than the sighted. We use other senses to compensate for the lack of eyes, and they always become much sharper as a result. My hearing was super good, so I hear my mother's crying very clearly. I also heard that Dad have always comforted her. And when Dad himself was on the verge of surrendering, Mom always came to help him. Long ago, when I initially realized that my parents were crying because of me, I felt very upset and offended. I even wanted to come to Mom and Dad and proudly ask him to take me to the orphanage. There, I figured, they would be able to get another child that won't upset them. At the time, I was just a small, resentful child. Fortunately, I've never done so. I quickly realized that our life has already been hard for Mom and Dad, and my folly would only upset them even more. At the same time, I'd like to acknowledge everything my parents did for me. Neither my mom nor dad showed me that I was any worse than my peers. I am sincerely grateful to my father and mother. Without the education they gave me, I would hardly achieve anything through life. Their support was invaluable. Until recently. I successfully graduated from high school and even entered a good college, all due to the support from Mom and Dad. They found specialists who taught me how to read Braille. Of course, I had to study in a special school, But my school years were top-notch. But the music club where I learned how to play guitar was just a normal club. I studied there side by side with normal children. And somehow, I had better grades than most of my healthy peers. Until recently, I did consider myself ill or special. I had good friends, a loyal and loving girlfriend, an excellent hobby, and serious goal for the future. You see, I was really hoping to become a perfumer. Of course, I always needed help with mixing the solutions. But the smells that I made were amazing. My concoctions surprised even the adult specialists. If there was such a thing as innate talent, then I was simply born to become a perfumer. I've already mentioned earlier that due to a lack of vision, all my other senses were extremely aggravated. It turned out that becoming a perfumer was much easier when your nose feels a gamut of odors completely inaccessible to all of your sighted classmates. Unfortunately, I've still got some difficulties to handle. Due to allergies, I could not get a guide dog. I traveled confidently among familiar routes, but I could not get into unfamiliar places without a friend or relative to guide me. Otherwise than that, however, I had zero problems. I guess it would have been much worse if I had initially been a sighted child and became blind later. But I was blind from birth and could not even imagine how sighted people perceive the world. I lived in a dark but comfortable world of my own, full of sounds, smells, and touches. And I was comfortable in that world of mine. Of course, Mom and Dad have constantly been telling me that sooner or later I would be able to see. I was waiting for this moment, and even hoped that they were right. But I had no idea what it was like to see anything. Well, I guess you wouldn't be able to understand me. For someone who has been blind since birth, promises of being able to see sound just like promises of a personal meeting with Santa. The older you become, the less you believe in it. But in my case, the promises of Dad and Mom transcended into reality. Sadly, now I'm not at all sure that this turned out to be for the best. I've gained sight in a rather unusual way. A thriving medical corporation was testing a new way of healing the brain that had something to do with nerves. I won't tell you the details. When it came to them, the doctors were unable to describe their own action in a way that I could understand. They promised me that in a case of success, I'd become sighted. And the most interesting thing was that I would not have to pay a penny for this. Dad and Mom were very wary when they heard, but corporate representatives quickly reassured my parents. Moreover, they promised to pay me a tidy sum for what was essentially a test of the company's newest product. I had nothing to lose, so we quickly agreed to the proposal of the doctors. Good news arrived almost immediately. During the initial checkup, the doctors noticed that the connections in my brain improved due to the changes that came with adolescence. So a chance of their new method's success increased to almost 100%. Parents were thrilled. Their greatest dream was finally going to be fulfilled. But I still wondered how sight could affect my life. I spent 2.5 months in the hospital room, having left it only to get another operation or two. That time was painful and scary, but thanks to my parents, I still held faith in the doctors. Mom and Dad convinced me that as soon as I would be able to see, I would immediately understand what I'd been missing for all these years. Unfortunately, the result was exactly the opposite. When my vision returned, I was horrified. The chaotic, noisy, and strange world I found myself in was wildly uncomfortable. People around me were vastly different from what I imagined them to be for my entire life. The comfortable universe of mine was shattered into pieces, and putting it together again turned out to be very difficult. I've spent 2 whole months assembling my own life back again brick by brick, gradually getting used to the new world around me. For the first 3 weeks after becoming sighted, I hardly even slept. I found it immensely scary to lose my vigilance in this eerie, colorful universe for even a single moment, not to mention the whole long night. Insomnia, multiple nervous breakdowns, panic attacks, and immense misunderstanding of what was happening around me. Those first months were horrible, to say the least. And the worst thing was that I had to cope with all of it alone. First of all, I tried to get support from Mom and Dad, but they just refused to understand my problems. Moreover, they accused me of trying to nullify all their efforts. I think they despise me now. My parents somehow thought that I've just become a drama queen out of nowhere. By the way, doctors say that in situations like mine, help of an experienced psychologist is vitally important. Unfortunately, Mom and Dad were sure that I was actually able to cope with all the problems myself, and even that I came up with most of the difficulties. Dad once told Mom, "That kid's just used to being an attention hog," and Mom nodded in agreement. And my friends, I've soon discovered that they weren't true to me. In a few weeks, I realized that my girlfriend, whom I'd been dating for 2 years, was cheating on me with my best friend right behind my back. Those two tried to hide their relationship when they realized that I really became sighted. But once I caught them in the act, naturally, I immediately broke up with her. All of my pals were not much better. For each of them, I was either a source of some advantages or a way to feel like a virtuous angel, but not a living, breathing friend who needed help and support. So it turned out that I had to cope with this whole world of noise and colors alone. And frankly speaking, I fared not that well. My performance at school has fallen by an order of magnitude. And now my parents constantly scold me because of it. Every day they accuse me of being an ungrateful swine. They've sacrificed everything for the sake of my sight, and now it turned out to be a bitter disappointment. And I have nothing to answer them. Try telling Dad and Mom that all their efforts were in vain, and it would be much better for me to stay blind. In fact, my problems at school, sleep disorders, and nervous breakdowns come from one source. You see, I found myself in a completely new world, and this world causes me to stay constantly on guard. It is very difficult to cope with such stress without any support. Even the changes of my reaction rate come from the very same source. I was used to navigating the world with zero vision, and now my vision only bothers me instead of helping. It forces me to check and double check the same things again and again and again. Oh, how I wish to return to that comfortable darkness. Even my dreams of becoming a perfumer were ruined. Due to the newfound vision, it was no longer possible for me to concentrate on the smell as I had been before. Now I can't even replicate the concoctions I've been making before, let alone make some new ones. My life was far more easier when I've been blind. Now I find myself in a strange and frightening world where my friends and family turned out to be either traitors or egoists. Oh, how I'd like to go back in time and dissuade Mom and Dad from the operation by any means. Alas, this is impossible, and I still do not understand how should I live now. If you know how to help me, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you have friends suffering from vision problems, show them this vid. Sometimes it's better to live without sight, after all.